Beyond the buzzer, inside the game, this is Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Hey, it's Tuesday, December 16th. Glad to be with you here again, coming to you from Atlanta. Continuing my work here as the Georgia High School Football Championship. It's great to be there in the Dome. 12th year doing this, and I'm going to put something on social media later. I haven't shared this with you or even producer Tony or editor Josh, anybody else, but play-by-play was my first love. This whole career began for me when I was in junior high, and everyone else had Atari games. I'm dating myself, of course, because I'm old. And the next game was in television. And so I would go in with the Intellivision game, had little sliding things you put on for each game. It was like the keypad was something different with what you put in there. And I would actually, my old Radio Shack, by the way, ask your parents, kids, Radio Shack tape recorder. What's a Radio Shack? They'll tell you. And it's where we all went for batteries, everything else. It was great. Well, I had a little tape recorder, and I would actually record the quote unquote broadcast of my games, doing play-by-play of these video games. They all had fake names, etc. My fake university, All in Scummins University. You've maybe heard about that. If not, there may be a book in the future years. We'll see, but it's an ongoing thing. But anyway, I would record these games, and that was my first desire, like what it would be like to be in the arena telling the story of this game. So to be here in Atlanta, doing this every December, and then basketball in March as well, is really cool. And it's, I don't know. Anyway, I'll get off that. So listen, we got a great show. Speaking of basketball, nobody we love talking basketball with more than Jerry Palm. He's been on the show before, new venture, palmbrackets.com. He's standing by, joining us here in a couple of minutes. And then a bit later, we'll talk with Eric Hansen of Notre Dame. The Irish, boy, what a December it's been. Not only not in the playoff, but then choosing not to play in a bowl game at all. And so we'll have that conversation as well with him. Good to have him back on the show. Let's get to a couple of headlines right now. It's amazing what a difference a few weeks can make in the NFL. 2 weeks ago, Pittsburgh fans wanted Mike Tomlin's head served up on a platter. The Steelers had lost back-to-back games to the Bears and the Bills, giving up over 400 rushing yards combined. Well, fast forward to today, the Steelers ended what little playoff hopes Miami had last night by dominating the Fish 28-15. The Pittsburgh defense smothering Miami's running game, holding them to only 63 yards on the ground. Aaron Rodgers, 23-27 in frigid conditions, 224 yards and 2 scores to lead the offense. At 42 years old, Rodgers becoming the oldest quarterback to complete 85 yards of his passes in a game. How about that? So hope springs eternal in winter, in December, in Pittsburgh. Okay. Other NFL news. The Commanders hoping that star quarterback Jayden Daniels would return this season after he re-aggravated that elbow injury in Week 14. But they've shifted course. They'll now shut down the reigning Offensive Rookie of the Year and allow Marcus Mariota to finish out the season at quarterback. This all according to CBS Sports. By the way, this evening, the third NBA Cup will be decided. The Spurs and Victor Wembanyama taking on the New York Knicks, led by Jalen Brunson. It's the first Cup finals for either team. On the court, Cade Cunningham with 32 points and 10 rebounds to help Detroit beat Boston 112-105, despite Jaylen Brown and Derek White combining for 65 points for the Celtics. Karis LeVert and Tobias Harris each with 13 points for the Eastern Conference leading Pistons, who've won 4 in a row. Nikola Jokić with 39 points, 15 rebounds, and 10 assists, another triple-double, his NBA leading 12th triple-double of the season. Denver over the Rockets, 128-125 in overtime. Jamal Murray added 35 points for Denver, which won a home game for the first time since November 8th. College ranks now, the new AP poll coming out. It's a status quo at the top. Arizona with 5 wins over ranked teams remains number 1. Michigan still at number 2 this week after double-digit wins over Villanova and Maryland. The other top 5, Duke at number 3, Iowa State, and then UConn coming in at 5. Purdue, Gonzaga, Houston, Michigan State, and BYU in order round out the top 10. The biggest mover goes to Nebraska. The Huskers, after an impressive road win at Illinois, move up to number 15 in the poll, their highest ranking since 1991. And in case you were asking yourself, has Nebraska ever been in the top 10 in the AP basketball poll? The answer is yes. Back in February of 1966, the Huskers, then part of the Big Eight, spent 4 weeks bouncing between number 8 and number 9. You have talked before about years ago when I was with CNN. I found this website collegerpi.com, right? I just was so intrigued. I'm always picking my own brackets and trying to get information. Jerry Palm, of course, as you now know, was the founder of that, and he now has a new venture, palmbrackets.com, and joins us once again here on the show. Jerry, good to see you.
It's good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about the new website.
Yeah, so palmbrackets.com is essentially a souped up version of College RPI. Of course, the RPI doesn't exist anymore. The BCS doesn't exist anymore. So I needed a different name. So I think I've got one that'll survive changes to the systems now. But so in football, it's standing scores, but also ranking projections, bowl projections, commentary on all of that. And then, through the playoff, I'll probably be writing a little bit during the actual games as well. And then the basketball side of the site is all of the data that you get, that the committee gets when they are looking at teams. The gory detail page is up now. That's the one that I think is the best, because it's every team and all of the NCAA resume relevant data just on one big grid, and then there are breakdown pages, so you can look at individual teams, and you have all the games on that page. It's impossible to put everybody's schedule on the grid page, but then you can see data largely the way the committee looks at it, and then later I'm going to put a team comparison tool on it so that you can look at two teams at once. So
nice,
but that's probably still a week or two away.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, it's been exciting to go in. I was in a couple of weeks ago. I've not gone in yet this week, but as you know, I've told you before, I lived on collegerpi.com and have always followed you. So will be right there. Constantly they're signing up and everything I have to do. Yeah, it's so good. You mentioned changes, and that's kind of the next thing I want to get to is college football playoff. I went on the show here 3-4 weeks ago and just told people, listen, if your team has 3 losses, you are not getting in. Stop with the hope and the praying. It's not happening. And we saw that now. Obviously, the controversy with Notre Dame, with Miami, with Texas not getting in. One, did you feel that the committee got it right? And number 2, what changes do you see possibly coming now that we're 2 years into this?
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem with the teams they chose. 3 losses getting in is unusual. 9-3 is probably going to take a very unusual circumstance for a 9-3 team to get in. 10-3 means that you were 10-2 and played a championship game. Then you lost your championship game. And the committee has always been kind to lower ranked teams that lose their championship game. Now, you don't always hold your spot, like Alabama held their spot, but you don't get punished as badly for the loss of the championship game as you might in the regular season. Mm-hmm. So for in Alabama's case, they also beat Georgia in the regular season, and they beat them at Georgia. So now you've got a split. So that's also a little bit different circumstance than the other teams that lost their championship games have. So, for me, they got the right teams. Miami should have been in a lot sooner, should have been ahead of Notre Dame a lot sooner. So if I have a problem with it, it's like, what took you so long to do the right thing? I memean, for the last few weeks, they've been, within a few spots of each other. Normally that would be enough to push them past, but no, they come out and they say, well, they've got to be right next to each other. Well, that's false criteria. That's baloney. They don't have to be right next to each other. Yeah. Miami had a slightly better schedule. Neither one of them had great schedules because they're so ACC loaded, and that league was not good this year, obviously. But but Miami had a head-to-head result. I mean, if that was going to matter on Selection Sunday, then it should have mattered 3 Sundays earlier. And so that's my criticism of the committee. I think that the teams that got in were the right teams to get in.
Yeah, I just feel I can't argue with any of that. I feel that for me, and I'm with you, like if they were good 3 weeks ago, then why weren't they in the spot 3 weeks ago? In fact, I've said the same things. We're thinking the same thing.
So, actually, this has happened before.
Yeah.
Only one other time have 2 teams that didn't play changed positions in the rankings. And that was in the very first year, 2014. You may remember Baylor beat TCU in the regular season. going into the championship week, TCU was actually 3 spots ahead. They were 3rd and Baylor was 6th. But the Big 12 did not have a title game. So they were off. The 2 teams in between won their championship games, jumped TCU, and now they're right next to each other. And then Baylor jumped TCU. That's the only other time at any week, not just the final week, that 2 teams that didn't play changed positions relative to each other from one week to another in the rankings. So twice in 12 years. Hopefully it won't have to happen again under what I would consider false pretenses.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say was that the problem is that we went to the 12 team to avoid the politics of picking this. But now, I mean, you can't argue that. Everyone's like, okay, well, you had to have an ACC team in there. That's why you did this. And I think that's where the committee, to me, that's where, okay, we were 2 years in. We've already lost faith in you because clearly you just said we got to have an ACC team in there because the ACC screwed up their process and no one was eligible.
Well, okay. My argument for that is that Miami should have been in to begin with.
I
Miami
agree.
earned their spot. So, so they didn't have to put an ACC team in just to put an ACC team in. What they had to do was put an ACC team in that should have been ahead of the team they jumped all along. So that's a different circumstance. Miami actually earned that spot, the spot ahead of Notre Dame in the rankings. That could have been, if things were just a little bit different, it could have knocked them both out.
Yeah.
So it's, they didn't have to put an ACC team in the field. I can see why people think that way, but really that only works if Notre Dame should absolutely be ahead of Miami. And if anything, it's the opposite.
Yeah. My point is though, is that they weren't leading up to it. They weren't. And so now once it's like the appearance of that is once Duke won, which meant if you put Notre Dame in, there's no ACC team. So you put an ACC. I don't disagree that Miami should have been in all along. I'm just saying the appearance of that makes it to where it's like now you bring the argument up. So here's and I want to get very quick. I want to get to basketball still. My thought for you is because we're always going to have unbalanced schedules and we're going to always have multiple teams tied for a key spot, first place, second place, whatever. Clearly now that's 2 years we've done this. Will the conferences change their matrix in choosing their conference championship contenders, or will we go to something where we see a 3rd place game or 5th place game in these bigger conferences to determine these other spots?
Well, I don't know about 3rd place games. I'd be surprised to see that. I think you can bet the ACC will change their tiebreaker and use the rankings to break the tie so that you get your 2 best teams in the game. And that, the hoops they had to jump through to try and make it a conference performance-based tiebreaker is crazy. Yeah. So I think it's, the path of least resistance is to go with the 2 best teams in the rankings when you have a tie. And you certainly don't want to be in the position that they were in, where this team with 5 losses goes into this game. And if they win, you got a problem, a big problem. Yeah. And you might not have anybody in the playoff.
Yeah.
And so they ended up with a team in the playoff anyway, but then that was perfectly fine. But I think you're definitely going to see, especially tiebreakers that are based so heavily on, conference performance, or where non-conference performance is completely ignored. I think that you're going to see that probably go away.
Yeah, talking with the veteran of all of these prognostications, Jerry Palm, and again, his new venture, palmbrackets.com. Want to get to basketball as well. Obviously, Purdue is still right there. The tough loss against Iowa State, but boy, Iowa State, Arizona looks great. Michigan looks unstoppable right now.
Michigan is laying waste to everyone on their schedule since about the 4th game. Unbelievable. Of course, they're scoring 100 almost every game.
Yeah.
They've been incredible.
Yeah, you can average 85 points per game in the Big Ten and be like 4th or 5th. I mean, because they're up there. Michigan obviously is strong. Arizona is strong. Who are some other teams that may have surprised you here in these first few weeks of the season?
Surprise. Well, I don't know that really too many of these teams are big surprises. Duke, obviously, no surprise at all, but they're right up there. Gonzaga, I would say I was a little surprised by Gonzaga. I didn't expect them to be bad. They like last year, they were in an 8-9 game. I didn't expect that kind of floor for them this year, that they would bounce back and be, a top 4 or 5 seed this year, but they're right up there as well in the top 5 of the rankings. that's the team that probably is in the top 5 of the rankings that I am most surprised to see in that part of the rankings.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm down in bluegrass country, and Kentucky fans just wringing their hands over their start 0-4 against ranked teams. I keep explaining that, for you guys, I mean, they're always probably ranked higher than they should be, at least the last 7 or 8 years, probably. And so when they start losing, all of a sudden they're terrible. It's like, pump the brakes. I guess I said before, I know a guy who actually, when they were getting blown out by Gonzaga, they actually went online and Googled Mark Pope's contract to find out when the buyout was. And I'm like, you're 9 games into year 2.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah.
So that is arguably the most rabid fan base, Kentucky basketball anywhere. So, you could expect some overreaction. I would have to say that personally, I'm surprised that they've struggled as much as they have. And it's not that the losses, it's kind of the nature of the losses. They've had a few that weren't really terribly competitive. Mm-hmm. And I guess I expected more from that team this year, that they would be better, and they may still get better. There's a long way to go. Conference play is just around the corner. So I wouldn't write off Kentucky yet, because there's a lot of talent on the floor out there. Yeah. So at some point maybe they'll find the switch that gets them turned on.
Yeah. Better second half at Rupp against Indiana Saturday night to get that win. Of course, the big game in Atlanta this coming weekend against former UK coach Rick Pitino and St. John's. As we get into conference, the new year after the holidays here in conference play these next 2.5 months, is there a team you're watching right now that maybe we haven't been talking about, has been flying under the radar?
Yeah, Nebraska.
Yeah.
I wasn't really entirely buying Nebraska. I'd watched them parts of a few games. And they look pretty good. Like I watched some of the Wisconsin game. I didn't get to see Illinois. But that winning at Illinois, that's the wake up call on Nebraska. It's like, all right, they've been looking pretty good, but they hadn't really beaten anybody to, get your attention. Where now you have to start paying attention. Well, now you have to start paying attention, because you go into Illinois and win, and you beat that team. That's a very impressive win. And Nebraska has to be considered, for real in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah. Amazing. Best start ever, 11-0, 15-game win streak going back to last year. They won one of the lower postseason tournaments. Mm-hmm. And so at 15, that's also best in school history. And look, we know that Fred Hoiberg can coach. That's not a question, but boy, they hit threes. They're efficient. They're veteran. They didn't lose their way on defense the way Illinois did in that game, and even Wisconsin, same way. I mean, Greg Gard was a 30-point loss. I mean, he was scratching his head later on. You're right. They're a team that we didn't see. That is one that could make some noise. Is there another team? It looks like a Cinderella possibly coming to March.
Oh boy. Let's see. I'm thinking mostly of the Big Ten. Oh, Iowa. I like Iowa too. Mm-hmm. They've been playing really well, and that's another team with a new coach.
Yeah.
He's done a great job, getting in and getting that team, keeping that team going, because they've been good. But when you have a coaching change, sometimes, and you're not this established power, which, most schools are not this established power. So that's not meant as any sort of slight at Iowa. But, it's sometimes you have kids transfer and whatever, and you're rebuilding your roster, and you don't have a lot of chemistry, and it takes a while. And Iowa's done a pretty good job coming right out of the gate and playing some good basketball. And they're going to be part of a very competitive top of the Big Ten this year. We already knew that we had, 5 or 6 teams that were going to be pretty good. And now we've talked about 2 more. Mm-hmm. And we haven't even really mentioned Indiana, who looks better. I don't know that they're as improved as, say, Nebraska, surely. But Indiana is probably going to be a tough out, especially on their home floor this year. So, it's the Big Ten is going to be a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Iowa, especially with Fran McCaffrey leaving and going to Penn, back to his roots. You lost a lot of key players. The Sandiford kid, Price Sandiford, who had the 30-point game for Nebraska at Illinois. He was with Iowa the past couple of years on with his older brother. And then the 2 guys who went to Creighton, Josh Dix and Owen Freeman also. Those are 3 big players that normally would have been at Iowa that are not. So you're right. What they've done so far is pretty impressive. Jerry, we're out of time, but man, I appreciate your time as always. PalmBrackets.com. Congrats on that. we can't wait to dive in, and we'll be knocking on your door here in the new year to ask you more questions as we get deeper into basketball.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Jerry, thanks so much. Jerry Palm, once again, he's the veteran bracketologist, if you will, statistician, you name it. I'm a numbers nerd. I won't call him that, but I think he probably would say, yeah, why not? PalmBrackets.com. Be sure to check it out. Okay, Sports IQ with Larry Smith continues.
If you're a diabetic, we have great news. You can end the painful finger sticks with a new CGM. Plus, they may be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. If you test and inject daily, you may qualify. Call US Med now to learn more.
800-390-5160. 800-390-5160. 800-390-5160. That's 800-390-5160.
You're listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
College football, of course, the playoffs coming up here this weekend. Tomorrow we'll have Texas A&M, the voice of the Yankees, Andrew Monaco, on the show. We've got more as well from the college football ranks on the show a bit later. We look to the FCS semifinals, working on getting Illinois State Insider, talking about that. Volleyball, of course, starting on Thursday night. We've talked about that. We'll have those conversations as well. Busy time right now. We've got NFL playoff picture is getting clear. Obviously, CFP is starting. Volleyball. We've got men's soccer, by the way. How about Washington on Monday, beating NC State for their first ever NCAA men's soccer title. Go Dogs, the Huskies, taking the title home to Seattle. But college football, though, Arch Manning made it clear he is going to return to Texas for his senior year. Manning, as you know, he's the nephew of football greats Peyton and Eli Manning, the grandson of Archie Manning, for whom he is named. But Arch Manning going to come back to Texas. Look, he already has a massive NIL deal. I think anybody watching thinks it's probably good for him to have one more solid full season as a starting quarterback to develop his skills before he looks to the NFL. So he is staying, but a lot of quarterbacks are leaving. Dylan Raiola in Nebraska announcing that he is going to leave after 2 years. He was a starter at quarterback as a true freshman for the Huskers last year, so he has 2 years eligibility remaining. His uncle, Donovan Raiola, was fired as the team's offensive line coach, and so maybe that may play into that reason. His younger brother, who was a quarterback at a high school in Georgia, decommitted earlier this fall. So again, big quarterback questions right now for Matt Rule. They're in Lincoln. DJ Lagway of Florida, the prized recruit, and the quarterback that many fans thought could maybe save Billy Napier's job. He could not. That was a consideration with the athletic director, of course, when he got rid of Napier, was, well, if I get rid of Napier, maybe I can still keep Lagway. Well, now neither are there at UF. And so Lagway will look for a new school once the transfer portal opens here in a couple of weeks. Aiden Childs is leaving Michigan State with the coaching change there. Doesn't want to be part of Pat Fitzgerald's program. Also, since he's Brendan Sorsby, he's also announcing that he's probably going to leave. We already have Arizona State's Sam Levitt, who led the Sun Devils to a Big 12 title last year and got into the CFP and made some noise there. He's already said he is leaving. So again, it is one where the transfer portal doesn't go up yet, but players already look. We know the conversation is already happening. We already know that, but it's clearly showing that these quarterbacks all will have many suitors once the portal does open here on January 2nd. By the way, in case you're wondering, of the 12 college football playoff teams this season, 7 are starting transfer quarterbacks. So there you go. NBA news last night, some history. Cooper Flagg scoring 42 points to become the youngest NBA player ever to score 40. He's 18 years old, turns 19 on Sunday. His Mavericks, though, still couldn't get the win as they fell last night. Meanwhile, in basketball, Tom Izzo, you might have missed this, Michigan State's veteran coach, Hall of Famer, gets $1 million raise and is now the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. $7.2 million a year is what he will now make. 70 years old, 31st season there at East Lansing. Of course, he won the title back in 2000, 27 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances, and the Spartans right now 9th in the AP poll this week. And finally, it is official in Kansas City, in case you were wondering, and I know you were, Gardner Minshew II will be the starting quarterback moving forward for Kansas City. Chiefs star quarterback Patrick Mahomes undergoing that season-ending surgery on that knee injury that will have him miss the rest of this season and really probably, at least half the 2026 season. Usually, again, as we talked about yesterday, 9 to 12 months is what it takes to come back from these. We'll see how fast he bounces back. But right now, Minshew is in charge in Kansas City, playing out the final couple of games of this team that is not headed to the playoffs at season's end. All right, stay with us. We'll talk Notre Dame with Eric Hansen up next on the Sports IQ.
You're locked in to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Well, thanks, Larry. It's been a little over a week now since one of the stunning happenings in the college football world took place when Notre Dame was left out of the final rankings after being in for 5 straight weeks, winning all 5 straight weeks, doing nothing but taking care of business, and then getting left out at the buzzer. We're joined today by Eric Hansen, senior writer for blueandgold.com. And Eric, has the stun, has the effect of what happened, is it worn off any in South Bend yet?
It depends who you talk to. I would say largely no. Wherever I go, whether it's casual Notre Dame fans or non-Notre Dame fans, that's a question I'm constantly getting, like, what happened? How did this happen? And then they have a pretty good litany of questions for me. The only ones that didn't were my grandkids.
They're probably more worried about Santa at this time of year.
That's
anyway, right? I mean, it was just, look, I know that the committee said when they finally got next to each other, blah, 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 head-to-head had to matter. But to me, as an outside football fan, you've got a team that lost 2 games by a total of 4 points to ranked opponents, highly ranked opponents, both in the top 10 at the time of the game was played, against a team that lost 2 games to unranked opponents, and in one of them didn't really look all that good.
Yeah, well, it's I've been an AP voter for more years than I haven't during my career, and I'm a current AP voter, and it is a difficult process because people want there to be these clean metrics where you can say, well, if this happens, this is going to happen. And things are very difficult to compare. And I'll give you for instance, the Big 12 is very difficult to compare to other conferences just because they played so few top 25 teams outside of their conference. Now, you look at Texas Tech and you go, they're really good. And they're clearly the class of that conference. But somebody like BYU and Arizona and Texas or Houston, they're harder to evaluate in terms of, and really Texas Tech to a certain point because you haven't seen them play, let's say, Texas, and so that's where you have to rely on the eye test because their non-conference schedule is very soft. You don't know how good the teams in their conference is. But I think for me, where this didn't make any sense started to happen the week of the last 2 shows. When Notre Dame had played Stanford out on the West Coast, beat them convincingly, and Stanford's not very good, but they did beat Florida State, which beat Alabama. But what the committee said, they flip-flopped those 2 teams, and they had Alabama and Notre Dame, which didn't make any sense to me. And the reasons given, I thought one reason I would have bought was, hey, look, Texas A&M lost. That is not as good of a loss as it was when they were an undefeated top 3 team. I could have maybe bought into that, but they're like, hey, Auburn, that's a rivalry game, and Alabama went for it on 4th down. That was so gutsy. And then, they were able to get a fumble late in the game. It's like, wait a second, this is a 7-point game. And Auburn was competitive with most teams. I mean, they're not your typical 5-7 team. But to flip-flop those 2 teams, it started to smell to me. And then the whole Miami thing about, well, if they're next to each other, then you can do head-to-head. But if they're not, you're not allowed to. Well, for me, when I would vote every week, that head-to-head was factored in. to everything else that was on those resumes. I felt like they should be. And I can understand people that want to weigh head to head heavier than I do. I don't think they're all created equal, when they happen, how the teams play after that,
Right.
what the margin of victory was. I'm sure there's Notre Dame fans saying, what about our head to head in 1993 with Florida State? So I think Miami is better than Alabama. I think Miami is a better team. Who had the better resume? Florida State is a much worse team than, but Miami didn't handle them necessarily. I think it was a 6-point game.
Yeah.
I think Miami had some unfortunate things with their schedule in that Florida wasn't very good this year, and that would have looked like a really good win. And they did. They pounded South Florida, but just the committee's explanation on why these things were happening make no sense to me as an AP voter. Again, none of us in the AP, there's 66 of us, you can go down those ballots and you never find an exact match. And if it's ever happened, I can't remember it, that we all vote the same 25 teams. We may agree on some spots, but not all 25. So that's part of the nature of it. But for Notre Dame to drop from 9 to 11 in a week with having won by 29 points just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people agree with that.
Right. But at this point, they're not going to change their mind on it. And, I think what Pete Bavacqua's job is to do, and I think everybody in college football, is come up with a process that makes more sense. We had Mike Golick Jr. on our podcast last week, and he talked, hey, maybe we need to have a camera in the room so you can hear the discussions and so forth. But to me, I don't think the process has integrity, and it certainly doesn't look like it has integrity, and it needs to have both of those. And I'm not just saying that because Notre Dame got left out, especially if you're going to have the cut line at 10, and that's where it was, between 10 and 11, and have, conference teams that are way below 12 making it into the field. I think you need a better process. And I think we're going to come up with answers over time. I don't think it's snap your fingers, oh, here's the solution. I wish it could be that easy.
Yeah, one thing we talked about here on the show last week was there's got to be some smarter people, obviously, than me out there that can take what happens in the college basketball world, and they have computer models, and they do a lot of that. They use the Ken Pom rankings, they use the net rankings, they use all of that when they're comparing. There's got to be somebody that can come up with a college football version of that kind of program to help these guys out, to make it a little more less biased in the long run.
I agree, and I also think there needs to be incentive to try to go out and schedule tough non-conference teams. I think if you're rewarded for, you're going to have the luck of the draw sometimes, where a team is much better than you thought they were, and you're going to get a lot more credit. And like teams that scheduled Clemson this year are going to be disappointed because, Georgia Tech, wow, we beat Clemson. And then later it was like everybody's beating Clemson.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of it, but if you're scheduling Arkansas Pine Bluff, that's not going to be a quality win in any way, shape, or form. And so I do think that has to factor into those computer ratings that you are playing challenging competition outside your conference, at least one game.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Pete Bavacqua talked about the AD there at Notre Dame of some damage being done to the relationship with the ACC. Is that something they're going to be talking about in the coming months, about how to possibly improve that relationship? Does any of this, I guess the bottom line for some of this is, does any of this lead to Notre Dame joining a conference in the future? Because that seemed to be where all the negative talk came from. Well, Notre Dame's got to join. They got to join. as a longtime Notre Dame fan, I love their independence because I get to see them play this cross section of teams from around the country.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, if I had a jet black hair on my head for every time that conversation has come up during my career, I would have no white hair on my head. But I don't think it's going to push them to join a conference. What it may do is encourage Notre Dame to see if there's someone else that will give them a similar deal. So Notre Dame there's three things that would get them to fully join a conference. There's three pillars, and one of them would have to crumble. One is an incompetitive media rights deal, and they have a great deal right now. Their contract extension and renegotiation with NBC, and also with what they're getting from the ACC, puts them in the same ballpark as the Big Ten and the SEC, as opposed to the ACC and the Big 12. So they're in good shape there. Do they have a place for their men's and women's basketball teams and their Olympic sports teams to play? Yes, in the ACC. The quality of men's ACC basketball has kind of gone down, but the other sports, it's a pretty good place to be. Baseball, it's really rough. It's difficult for them to compete there, but I still think that's a good arrangement. And then the third thing is, do they have an access to get to a national championship? Well, they do. And I think I would think that this is an outlier year in terms of them not getting maybe a fair shake. And so those things are all in place. So why would you leave the ACC? Well, if you feel like it's been permanently damaged and you don't see a better relationship moving forward, I think you have to look at, are there legal loopholes for you to get out of it? And I also think you need to look at, is there something better? I know I had a great source a few years ago tell me that when Notre Dame put this together and started playing ACC football games in 2014, 5 a year on average, that the SEC was like, you know what, we might have been willing to give you something similar to that, and we wished you would have come to us. Greg Sankey and Pete Bavacqua have a very good relationship. So that could be something that they look at. I don't think it would happen with the Big Ten, even though it makes some geographical sense. And the Big Ten has a wide enough footprint now that you're not so Midwest oriented. But I don't think there's a good match there with the commissioner, Tony Petitti. I just think he's hard. He doesn't play in anybody's sandbox well. I do think Notre Dame owes itself to do that. And I do think that that's on the table of them kind of looking around and saying, is this the best place for us? It's not just about hurt feelings. It's about, the ACC is really good for Notre Dame. And I know Notre Dame fans don't always want to hear that, because they will schedule those games in November when Notre Dame needs schedule octane. Right. People are playing big games in November and Notre Dame sometimes isn't. And if the ACC goes away, who's going to, it probably is a group of 6 or group of 5, whatever group we're calling them these days, the group, you're going to end up with that. And it's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt the perception of your program that you're not winning big games in November. So, but the problem is the ACC quality has gone down. Those games, a lot of those games aren't being perceived. Playing Boston College, did that help? I think Pittsburgh did, until Miami did the same thing to Pitt that Notre Dame did at Pittsburgh. Yeah. Can you get it? And I don't think that playing USC every other November is going to be realistic. I think if that series continues, and I think there's a lot of encouragement that it will, is that you might have some gaps. You may not be playing in late November. And so I think it's smart to look around and see if there's a better solution there. Notre Dame at least got the Clemson series scheduled out as a standalone. But then is Clemson going to collapse, or is Clemson going to go back to being Clemson at some point?
Yeah, I think that's the key issue. When they turn the bowl game down, Eric, I've been on record and talked in our shows for the last year that, look, I think the bowl games have kind of outlived their usefulness. If you want to set up something, if the practices are so important, let everybody have 15 practices. And if you are going to a bowl game, maybe you get 5 extra, whatever the number is that they can decide upon. But to ask these young men to risk themselves in a game that's purely an exhibition at this point, there's really nothing to play for. Like the old bowl games, when if you were number 3, and okay, I'm playing 5, and if 1 and 2 lose, I got a shot at a national title.
Right.
So that's an important game. Going to the Pop-Tart Bowl or the Pool and Weed Eater Bowl or the, what used to be the Gator Bowl, I don't even know what name it is these days.
Tax Slayer.
Yeah, the Tax Slayer Bowl. Is that really important anymore? I don't think so. And I stand with the players who say, I'm not going to risk it in an exhibition game. And I think, that's something that maybe Notre Dame can lead the way in. I don't know. I just think these games have reached their end. They don't really serve a purpose other than programming for ESPN and money for these cities.
Yeah, I think different programs look at them differently. I think if you've not been to a bowl game in a long time, you're excited about it. But the vast majority, I think we're going to see fewer of them, and we're already seeing some of them have announced. I think a couple of them announced that this is going to be their last year of existence. And we were talking to Mike Golick, maybe the Pop-Tarts should have mayonnaise on them, and that would be, we start combining these. I like the concept of it being, I think Rick Neuheisel came up with this, of this kind of being the beginning of next season, that these are developmental exhibition games. And so it doesn't count on your record. Participation isn't, mandatory. You're really kind of looking at next year's team, and the score is not going to count against you. It may help you in your preseason ranking the next year, but I think that may be the way to go. And yeah, I don't know. Had Notre Dame accepted the bowl bid, I don't know how many Notre Dame fans would have been really excited to go watch them play BYU. And nothing against BYU or any other opponent. I just don't feel like that is something, unless it was across the street from where they live, that they'd really want to be motivated to go there. For me, I like Orlando. It's way warmer than South Bend this time of year, but it doesn't make sense. There's 10 teams that have opted out completely of bowl games this year, and Notre Dame was one of them.
Yeah, so they weren't the only one, and I don't see that trend stopping in coming years. I think more teams are going to say, look, we played our season, we did our best, it's time to move on. We got other things to think about between signing day and the portal and everything else that goes along with it. Going to a bowl game now is almost not only anticlimactic, but it kind of hurts you going into the next season.
Well, and a lot of, we've seen so much coaching turnover, and it feels like that's going to continue. And some of these teams turned it down because of that coaching turnover. Notre Dame, the last time they had a team vote it down was 2009 when Charlie Weiss got fired, and they did have an option to go to bowl game, and they opted out of that at that point. But different circumstances. But yeah, I do wonder how much, and they've been so powerful for so long, and the bowl experience back in the day was really fun, but college football is in a different place, and it's so revolving around the playoff.
Yeah, the playoff really has taken up the land space, the airspace, it's become the behemoth in the room, and rightly so. It's the great way to end each season and find out who is the best, and hopefully in the coming years we'll actually get the 12 best teams to play, or we may be going to 14, 16, who knows what number we end up with, after this next season.
Right. Hopefully not 24. I think 16 is the right number. I could live with 14 as well.
Yeah, I could live with 14 or 16. I do believe 24 is too much. I don't think then you're cheapening the regular season. Because if that team that finished 24th with 4 losses still has a shot at a national title, something's wrong there to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Eric Hansen, thank you so much. Eric Hansen, he is senior writer for blueandgold.com. Really appreciate your time. Happy holidays, my friend. Have a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year. And we'll talk to you again on the flip side of the calendar.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
We will be right back with more of the Sports IQ after a brief timeout.
Producer Tony joining me now as we talk NFL. Boy, just a tough double whammy for the Chiefs this weekend, Tony. They lose the game, fall out of the playoff contention. They're now eliminated. And then Patrick Mahomes goes down with a knee injury. Not just ending this season, which is, again, at this point, they're not going to be in the playoffs anyway, but you take out a good chunk of next season as well. What have we learned from the Kansas City experiment?
It was really great to see a dynasty being able to form in this era of salary cap football, right? We're paying quarterbacks more than we've ever paid them before, and they eat up so much of that space. But they've managed the cap pretty well until the last couple of years, and were able to do it. And they built this team foundationally the right way. They have a great defense. They keep bringing in different weapons to kind of help Patrick Mahomes. Just the way they brought him along, didn't make him start his first year, lived with Alex Smith until he got hurt. Then, turned this team over to Patrick Mahomes in his second year, gave him that year to win. I think that's one thing a lot of teams should take away from this. You can have a generational quarterback, and it's not the worst thing in the world to have them sit for a season, learn the NFL ritual, figure things out. It may make them better in the long run. Just because you may not have a starter, find somebody for a year. Let this person learn. You throw them right to the Wolves. Yeah. You've only got that 5-6 year window before starters get huge money. Give it just a little time. Just give it a little time. It may work out better for you in the long run.
And we've seen that before. I mean, Steve McNair, remember back the old Houston Oilers sat the first year behind Chris Chandler. They wound up firing the offensive coordinator, Jerry Roan, over some concerns that he wasn't helping McNair. He was buddy-buddy with Chris Chandler, the existing quarterback, but he went on to have a stellar career and led the Titans, of course, to the Super Bowl. And now you're seeing as well, I agree that it's such a complex game. It moves so much faster than the college game. It's just much more sophisticated. Invest that money in the first year. You see rookie quarterbacks coming in. It's so much harder, and it's rare for a rookie to come in and make that immediate. Drake May, right? His first year didn't do much. Now he's an MVP candidate in year 2. Bo Nix the same way out in Denver. So totally agree with that. I know you're a Bills fan. You make no bones about it. And even though you feel they still have some issues right now.
Yeah, I mean, they won their 10th game this past weekend, 7th straight season. They've won 10 games. That's all well and good. But if you're looking at a team that can make a deep playoff run, I just don't see it. I mean, right now, Josh Allen is willing them to victories almost single-handedly. The biggest issue I see, 4 times this season, Larry, the Bills have given up over 200 yards rushing in a game, including this past weekend. You can't make a living like that. You cannot survive in playoff football in the NFL giving up 200 yards rushing. That means you're going to lose the time of possession battle. It means that you're going to, that team is eating up clock. Your defense is getting tired, so they can't make a stop when they need it. That is not a winning formula for playoff football.
Yeah, it's tough. They did make some noise with that big win over the Patriots, and they're now within a game of, where we kind of thought the AFC East was going to be New England's. It could still fall into the hands of Buffalo. We'll see what happens. With that, who are your favorites now as we are just a couple of weeks away from finishing out the regular season? Who are your favorites as we get into January and begin to march toward the Super Bowl?
As I'm looking at the playoffs right now and how things sit, I think the Rams are in an excellent position in the NFC. They're the healthiest team in the NFC next to the Bears. I don't think the Bears are quite ready to make that leap to a Super Bowl contender. It'll be great to be in the playoffs, let them learn, see how it goes. I think Matt Stafford has got that Rams offense humming. They can do it on the ground. They can do it through the air. They need to make sure Devontae Adams is healthy, even if he's got to sit out a game or 2 here. More importantly, make sure Devontae Adams is healthy come January. The AFC still a little more wide open. I just don't know who's the favorite there. I want to say the Houston Texans at this point. They've won 6 in a row. They're a more veteran team. They've got an outstanding defense. I'm just not ready to put New England and Denver in that class of saying they're a Super Bowl favorite. Right now, if I had to place a bet, I'd place a bet on the Houston Texans to make it to the Super Bowl.
And that's something after the past several years of the Chiefs and Ravens and Bills being there atop the AFC conversation. 3 different teams, and including a Houston team, as you mentioned, they've been fantastic defensively. And to your point, they finally have C.J. Stroud back healthy. They managed to kind of keep the ship afloat with Davis Mills, but now he's back. They're a different team right now, and you're right. They're a team maybe as dangerous as anybody there in the AFC. All right, our moment of awe is up next.
Fans of big sports radio and sports spectacular podcasts have a new home on the Chief Sports Network. Find your favorite programs and content all in one place by downloading the Chief Sports app in your mobile device. Created in South Carolina, the Chief Sports Network is the home of an expanding network of live and podcast format programming. It is also the home of one of the leading national college football podcasts, JC and Morgan, hosted by ESPN's Mike Morgan and 24/7 Sports' JC Sherbert. Download the Chief Sports app for free and find all of your favorite programming under one easy umbrella. Thanks to all of our markets for your loyal support of Big Sports Radio and our Sports Spectacular podcast, and we look forward to connecting with you anywhere in the world on the Chief Sports app.
Well, time now for a moment of awe. We go back to the state high school championship ranks for this one. Florida Class 7A title on the line. Lake Mary trailing Vero Beach in the final seconds when Noah Grubbs throws up the Hail Mary pass to Barrett Schultz, who then hands off to Tavares Brundage Jr., and he takes it across the goal line for the game-winning touchdown. Lake Mary, in improbable fashion, winning the Florida State title in Class 7A, and that is our moment of awe for today. Thanks to our guests stopping by, Jerry Palm coming by, also Eric Hansen. We always appreciate you spending part of your day with us. Make it a great Tuesday, and we'll see you on Wednesday here on the Sports IQ.
Thanks for listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith, Monday through Friday. Continue the conversation at Sports IQ LS. We'll see you next time.